listening to Conversations with Chanda, a podcast and event series hosted by Chanda Smith Baker. Today we have the Lynx coach, Cheryl Reeve, and one of the players, Napheesa Collier. Now, after this recording, Coach Reeve won the 2020 WNBA Coach of the Year award. We want to congratulate her as she becomes the third coach in league history to win the award 3 times. And stay tuned, because in the next episode, we will be featuring the Timberwolves coach, Ryan Saunders. I hope you enjoyed the show.
I appreciate you, Coach Reeve, and Napheesa Collier for being on the podcast. The league has been really masterful in terms of weaving in social justice into the games. And at the beginning of each quarter, and it's like you're being really intentional in terms of what you're wearing, how you're presenting. First off, like I could not be more inspired by that. And then secondly, I'm really curious on what has the fan response been?
Yeah, I think it's been so impressive the way that the league has coordinated. You know, the Players Association, the league have been collaborating for more than a year now. We had a big CBA to negotiate, and then obviously, what we want our league to be about. It's more than basketball. It always has been, and so the courage it takes, the strength it takes to be great at what we do on the court, but then also stand for those that don't have the voice that we have. And I think that there's a section of people, and there's a lot of them, that think that, this is politics and we should keep politics out of sports. I don't know why civil rights are politics. That means, civil rights are for everyone. Politics is about Democrats and Republicans fighting over what we do with our tax dollars and specific plans. It's not about fighting about, equal rights that are defined in the Constitution. So, like Fee said, you kind of question those people. Those are the ones that we're talking about that are, line in the sand, and we don't want it rammed down our throats. When for centuries, people, when people say the system's broken, well, the system was never right to begin with. And so, we have a generation around the world. This is not just localized here in America. This is around the world that we are recognizing. This isn't about blaming someone for slavery. This is about saying we want to fix the wrongs. We want to move forward, and we need to be able to have recognition in the ways in which we have marginalized the Black and brown communities, right? Police brutality is a massive way, right? But the criminal justice system is a whole nother element. There is so much that we could get into. We can talk about lending with banks. And there's just so much that we have not changed. And for those that don't want to hear it, like Fee said, too bad, because we have to shine a light. That's a responsibility of leaders. And that's what we define ourselves to be, leaders in our communities.
Yeah, I love it. And reflecting on conversations that I've had with leaders or people in positions, people that are working in community, that care about the community, that say, I don't have a complete handle on this issue. Like, I want to get informed because I want to do more. And I think that, trying to be perfect and understand all the history and the complexity of it has hampered people from just kind of getting in the game, if you will, and just being for civil rights and standing for the end of police interactions with our communities that aren't upholding what that responsibility should include. And so I imagine that, Coach, you did not have everything figured out, but you still were willing to kind of get in there and use your platform and lend your voice. Is that right? Like, can you talk a little bit about your evolution?
Yeah. I've been coaching in the WNBA since 2001. I would say my experiences prior to that, in terms of, when you're younger, you think you know how the world works and you got everything figured out when you're younger, right? But the older you get and the more experiences that you gain, the more people that you meet from, a variety of backgrounds, you start to really understand things, and what it means to be marginalized and the ways that we do it. Obviously the biases that exist, I would say for me, it was just listening, hearing, And then, going, I'm going to see the history of this and watching things, reading things. I'm really big. I'm listening. Chanda, you sent me that great podcast of 16 Shots, the Laquan McDonald situation in Chicago. There is so much in that podcast. Literally, if someone just listens to that podcast, there's so much to unpack in that. It is unbelievable. And I so appreciate you sharing that with me. And I have listened to that in my time in the bubble. I told you I walk.
Yeah.
And I walk and I have steam coming out of my ears. And I think about how much we have to tackle. And so I think what we try to do, just like we do, like if I'm, with our team, if I look up and I look out, it's pretty daunting when you think about all that you have to do, all the things you want to be good at, all the ways you want to lead and put people in the right position. It can be pretty daunting. So all you can do is focus on the day to day, what you do day to day, and in those tasks, and as players, being focused on winning a drill. That's what you can focus on to create a direction, a meaningful direction. Well, it's the same way in life that, there's so much to change that literally it's so overwhelming that you just kind of go, it feels like nothing can get done. And that's where, Glenn Taylor's comment about the baby steps of being laser focused and intentional about, something that you can actually enact change with and how to do it. And that's all I've tried to focus on and use my voice. And regardless of what backlash there might be, like Fee said, there's some people that you're not going to be able to change. And those are the ones that, that leave the comments, either on a Lynx story in the Star Tribune or on social media accounts, that act as if they were fans in the first place. I suspect they weren't. We're Black women. I suspect that they weren't fans in the first place. So, but you just deal with that. That's it comes with the territory. When you have the courage to use your voice, that's what happens.
Yeah, well, I can say like watching you and your leadership is like a master class, right? Like, because you're encouraging leaders, you're leveraging your sort of platform to increase the platform of others. And I do think that is so much about leadership. So thank you for what you're bringing to our communities and how you're leading and showing all of us. And I would say even the NBA how to lean in. Napheesa, you come from a family of leaders. And, I was really impressed, and I see, I think it was your grandfather. I see this amazing picture in this library a couple of days before Kennedy was killed, making negotiations and doing this work. And, I also come from a family that really was, took their responsibility and their service to communities seriously. And I'm curious on how that shaped you and has prepared you to kind of take on this broader sort of platform and activism.
Yeah, it's something that it's kind of weird because it's always been a part of my family. So I didn't realize growing up really the impact and how important it was. It was just, it just was. And it was stories my dad would tell me. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's really cool that he did that. It's like, oh, grandpa's, it's just, and then it's like, you get to like this point in your life and things going on in the world, and you really realize how important, how meaningful, and how impactful it was, the things that he did. And it's like, you have to call on those stories from your childhood. When my dad would tell me those stories, and it's just like how brave, and it's just really cool to do that. So to the fact that I have that in my family, it makes me even more want to do this, to carry on kind of that legacy, to be like, it didn't stop with you. We're still doing the things that you were still doing back then. We're still trying to step up and speak up in our own way, and to be brave ourselves. So it's really cool to kind of have that in my family, and it makes me want to do that now even more.
And do you ever think about a couple generations from now, like your relatives looking at your leadership and the documentation of how you're leading right now and how that might influence them? Do you ever think about it in that way?
I don't think about it as me personally, but I do think about just in history what it's going to look like. And I feel so proud that I'm a part of this league, and especially this year in particular, of dedicating our season to this. And we are in such a crazy time. I mean, the year of 2020 alone, this has been going on for a long time, but specifically this year, everything has kind of just come to a head and blown up. And I'm really proud that I can say that I did what I could to be a part of the change in this time that we're in, because it is going to be in history books, and you are going to look back and say, what did you try to do to help or make a change? So I am proud that I am a part of this league that's actively doing something for the better.
Yeah. The other thing I thought about with you, is that, I'm older than you, and I did not grow up with kind of these images of these shootings in the way that your generation has. And, Michael Brown happened, I think, not that far from where you were living in 2014, but you're also with social media, and I don't know how much you're on it, but certainly regardless if you are or not, you're hearing about these cases, Breonna Taylor, and really proud to see some of the settlement that happened with her family yesterday. But I'm curious how, being from a generation where these images are normalized in some way, do you think, do you have any thoughts about how that might have shaped you as well?
It's really hard to see that, because I think before, like you said, you hear about it, and like the really bad ones you see in the news, but you never see it in the act of happening. You never see them actually being shot, having their necks sat on, being beaten. You don't really see that as much before, and you see it all the time. And the fact that you can even say it's normalized is sickening, because we're seeing it so often. And it really does just make me sick to my stomach when I see those. It's so hard to watch, and I don't want to, but I kind of force myself to, so I don't get used to it. I don't just scroll past it and I see that this is still happening. And these are the ones we're only catching on tape. Imagine what happens when they're not being recorded. And this has just happened in the past couple of years when we're recording like this. Imagine what happened before, where things were worse. So I think seeing that is really impacted us, but changed us for the better, because we see that it's not just an ambiguous thing happening. We're seeing it happening live, not live, but recorded, and it just makes it a lot more real, and it makes us want to kick it into gear even more to make a change.
Mm-hmm. Coach, you talked about some of the other issues that we're facing communities. So there's criminal justice, there's the disparities that we have in education. There's so many things that are happening that run down this racial line that should be just a basic human right, to go to school, to get healthcare, to have a place to live, right, to have enough to eat. How do you see weaving activism moving forward, and what issues do you think that you will really focus on?
Well, I'd love to as we partner with the Minneapolis Foundation, I would love to be more involved directly with communities, so more intentional. I use this example. I going through a home remodel and was getting a mortgage, and I've been very intentional in my life about where I put my money. Again, that was probably more the last decade. Prior to that, you don't really understand your own economic power, your individual economic power. It may feel like it's only $5 to Chick-fil-A, but or whatever corporation it is that you choose to take a stand on, understanding how it all works. And so for me, actually, when the George Floyd situation hit, I said, again, as I was educating, when it came to lending, I thought, I'm about to give a lot of money, to a lender. I want to make sure that they represent what I would like to see in them. And so I said, hey, by the way, before we move forward, please tell me how you impact our local community with regard to the Fair Credit Act, lending, and your rates. That a Black family can apply for a loan for the same amount, have the same background, versus a white family. Where they live could change the rate, and that Black families would pay more despite maybe their income being greater. They might be, there's just a number of things. And what I found was actually through this was the place I was going to partner with was exactly what I would hope. And so I want to partner with them to see, can I do more? So not just in, my transaction, but how can myself in that place, how can we do more? They outlined all the things that they do. I now want to be involved more in those things. And so if I could take that example and really spread that out and learn more about who's doing what and where my help is needed. It could be financial help. It could be my presence. Like you said, amplifying in some way using our platform. So there's much to be done. Obviously we're talking a lot about voting. For me, like voting is really important, but I want to take an even deeper dive because Democrats have been a part of leadership, because I think the implication is vote. I think it's mostly get Trump out, but yeah. But somehow there's an implication that the only Republicans cause these problems. That's simply not true. There's, and I say this, that probably gets the most kind of, where people kind of, white men are at the root of a lot of the problems, right? And so it doesn't mean I don't like white men. It's more, we have to hold white men more accountable to the wrongs of the past and how we move forward in the future. So as it pertains to hiring practices, again, for me to be more intentional about my involvement, my own corporation, my own organization, what can I do? So there's so much that we individually can do, and it might feel really small, and it might take longer than what you want to make change, but that's the fight that we all, the unaffected. I am so affected by the notion of the unaffected being affected. That is how you get real change. We are all affected by what's happening to our communities. And so the notion that the unaffected, bringing much greater awareness to who we mean when we say the unaffected, and how we, those that are more privileged, can do more and have to do more. And that's my commitment, especially locally in our communities.
Mm-hmm. You talk about white men, and I'm curious on, do you see what their role is in moving us forward?
I do. I think they have a very defined role. It's been such a path for that demographic that they haven't been. When I say held, a lot of it isn't intentional. I see that as it pertains to women trying to gain equality, that I might share something with a man, either something they said that I found to be condescending, or a marginalization, and you bring it to their attention. I didn't realize. That's a lot of times what I get is I didn't realize. And so there is an education process of saying, hey, when you do this, or you say this, or when you dismiss this, this is what it means. And so I think making sure that we're educating and saying, okay, you know what, I really think we can do better in this way. And you hope that you have someone in that seat that's listening and feels a responsibility to be not just interested in doing better, but committed to doing better. And so I think that's, their role is great. I know when I talk about, obviously I'm immersed in women's sports and trying to empower women and trying to reach equality. Men are a direct ally in that to make that happen. This is about men wanting to share the power, and that's the root of the problem. That's a difficult thing for many.
Yes, it is, isn't it? And I think, Napheesa, you and I have both the gender and being women of color. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the number of times that I may have been at a table where I felt either offended by what was said. I felt like what was said wasn't representative of my experience in the same community that they were speaking of. And, making my attempt to educate in the moment, and then the consequence actually falls back on me. And, I have been learning over my career on how to do that in a way that opens up the dialogue and not shuts it down. But I think that when you get kind of put back in your place, it's difficult to kind of get back up and keep moving. And I just want to acknowledge that. Napheesa, in your time in leadership and in your role, when you encounter sort of those moments, because I think it sometimes can feel a little bit easier to talk when you are part of a group that is committed to an issue. But when you're on these one-on-one conversations, sometimes it can feel a little bit harder to take a stance. What is your comfort level with that? And what advice might you have for people that are trying to figure out how to just be in the room different?
Yeah, you talked about how you kind of had to learn and navigate how to do that. I feel like I'm still in that space, learning how to navigate and do that, because a lot of the time, like, that will happen and I feel like I don't like that, but I don't have the words to express why that's wrong, why I don't like it. And so something I've been trying to do is trying to figure out exactly why that bothers me and put it into words. So that's kind of, I feel like that space that you were in, I'm in now, just like, I know it's wrong. I know I don't like it. I know what they said isn't correct, but why do I feel this way? And like, how do I express to them that that's not right? So that's kind of like the chapter that I'm in, is trying to put that into words and say, like, I don't like that. Why did you say that? And kind of like Coach was saying, like, they didn't even realize. Like, it's hard for me to get to the next step because I understand why you didn't realize, but it's hard for me to explain to you why it was wrong, kind of thing. So I feel like that's kind of the space that I'm in now.
Yeah. Is it complicated by your age?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I just don't have the experience with it yet as much, but it's definitely something that I want to try to change, because as you guys know, it's a terrible feeling and you don't want to do that, and not being able to express why, I feel it just compounds onto why I'm frustrated about it. So it's a space that I definitely want to grow out of.
Mm-hmm. If I could add to that,
yeah,
Chanda, I'm thinking of my 25-year-old self. You're 25, Fee? 24. How old are you? 23. Okay, so my 23-year-old self. When I think about Napheesa and what the world she's growing in and the leadership role that she's taking on at the age of 23, it's incredible. And so I think, Fee, allowing yourself that space, to grow, into who you are, and being pushed outside your comfort zone at such a young age is going to be really impactful, I think, in your life as you navigate that. The most important thing that I think that Napheesa's generation has is courage. The courage that you're saying, I recognize it, I hear it, I don't like it, and I'm going to find a way to call it out, so that I can help educate someone. That courage this generation has is empowering to someone like myself that came from being 23 and basically being silenced in every possible way. You just were not permitted to talk about it. Now there's just so many ways that we can shine the light, and I think that's a big responsibility for Napheesa at the age of 23.
Yeah, I mean, as we wrap, I know you guys need to go. I just want to close and say that courage it comes through. It's coming through in every moment. Like, the weekend that you all were taking a stance and ESPN was just nonstop with kind of footage. I mean, I was glued. I could not leave. And I just remember thinking, wow, I wish, like, when I was like 23 or whatever, 25, like that I was in a community of people that had courage, right? That the way that I'm watching that generation lead right now is pushing me to think about, am I being bold enough? Am I aligning myself? Like, because there's moments of isolation that you feel in leadership, but this idea of being part of a team, right? Like, I'm envious of that by itself, right? But to be part of a team that is about something and being intentional about who you surround yourself with, because strength does come in numbers. And I just want to be super clear that, beyond just having really awesome games, the influence, Coach, that you and this team and the WNBA and sports is having right now is historical, right? It's going to be read about, it's going to be studied, it's going to be replicated. And I just honor and thank you both for taking time to talk to me today.
That's the Minnesota Lynx coach, Cheryl Reeve, Lynx player Napheesa Collier, and Chanda Smith Baker. You You can follow Chanda on Twitter at Chanda S. Baker. This is Sue Pat Kienitz from the Minneapolis Foundation. Thank you for listening to Conversations with Chanda.